Get it. For real, for real. Let's get it. Let's do this right here. This is what I'm sipping on today. You know what I'm saying? I'm a stay at home dad. He- Check. You hear me? He-
The ritual. Take you on this earth as quick as doctors delivered you. Papa said a man ain't no man if he got no principle, no business on my cell, ain't no telling just what they listen to. People only wanna see me, they done broke my. No mercy on my enemy, I smoke one. Don't gamble with your life,
Hold
with
on,
your
dog.
last one. Him real gangsta,
See
no
here.
first one. Bad man.
Power on. Bluetooth mode.
That to yes. If they had, I would have read that if they had an additional, 30 seconds or another 500 cc engine
Auxiliary mode.
back to run, whether it was physically moved or electrically moved back to run, that the engine was spooling up and it might have had time to spool up.
Let's get it. Let's get it.
Ready to descend. I would like to point out a different pilot perspective scenario that may have occurred. And I call it a pilot action sequence or pilot sequence action. Pilots during our flight were trained to move a lot of switches in a certain sequential order. On occasion, and this is connected to your human brain, your brain is called what's called muscle memory, and you move the switch at a certain time at a certain event. The pilot on this flight may have had his hand resting on the fuel switches. For whatever reason, like to leave his hands there, we don't know. Okay, and his brain sent a message to him.
Let's get it.
It turned this way. Fine, maybe he thought he was at the gate where he was shutting the engine down when he was expecting to hear something else from the pilot flying. We just don't know, and this is called an execution error, where your brain is trained to do things, tells your body or your
GTA.
hand to move things, but it occurred at the wrong time. It was the correct act, but it was done at the incorrect time, which caused a fatal error.
Let's see what's going on here.
So there's, I think, 69 of the 53 with the molecules.
Get a better setting. Charlie, come in, boys. Let me show you how my dog, Chad. Come in, Charlie. There go Charlie. Charlie gets so big. Oh boy, you stink. I gotta take you a shower. I gotta get cleaned up. What do you bet? What do you bet? All right, let's go. Let's get it.
Thrown out of that wreckage and so you the fireball overheated. And something cushions you right in the air.
I'm wasting.
Because
Oh, wow. All right, let's go. Let's go, Chad. This is how you drop. Let's get this money for GTA to see what's up. I ain't gonna hold you. I'm gonna finish do this mission with one of these niggas. And I'm gonna clap them so I get more bread. It's a bigger cut. See what's going on here. Boom. I'm about to turn the corner. I gotta get better lighting and better camera, you know. If I'm gonna take the streaming shit by the choke hole, I gotta get better equipment. I I don't. Get up out of here, bro. This shit should have been tricky. It should be tricky. Boom. Got it open. Got it open, chat. On the first try. Out of here, though. Five. Five. Oh, they going back to the front. To the back. I'm going out to the front. I done did this mission 100 times. You know what I'm saying? You go out to the front. The boss gonna be right here popping out.
These are luxury.
Clap him once he come out. Right here. Got him.
December. Celebrate Independence Day. Get 0.9% APR on
Get that bread. Get in the car.
Eligible lunch get holders get up to $3,000 allowance on onboard meals.
Get up out of here. That's it. That's it, Jack. Get up out of here real quick. Taking red lights and everything. Get up out of here.
Officer and host of the Scrap Podcast. Hal Kemper is here to discuss a range of international issues. As always, Hal, well, thank you for coming on. One of the toughest pivots in news history, going from sharing people's pets to talking about international affairs. By
Let's
the way,
see.
I
Yeah.
mentioned
Let's run that mission back.
break saying this is our Pomeranian poodle. So that's what Hal has in his backyard there. What's its name, Hal?
Poodle, big poodle. Yeah. Some of the neighbors say he's unbearable.
Unbearable, yeah. That's clawsome, Hal. That's again, sort of maybe frustrated. Interesting thing I saw today, Hal. There was a meeting in North Korea. Specifically, I saw Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who spoke in North Korea today. The U.S. leader Kim Jong-un. The relationship between Russia and North Korea has been flourishing in recent years for greater supply troops and ammunition.
Let's do another mission.
Assistance. What are they doing meeting like this? Why do they
You are now
need
tuned
to
into
meet
the
in
lab.
person?
What's
Are they
good, Los
strengthening their
Santos?
relationship?
Live on Lighting Up
Let's get it. Come on. Let's get it. Let's get it.
They're watching all of this very closely. U.S. forces Korea are watching this very closely.
Chase mode.
And there's this tightening up, if you will, of the relationship between Russia.
Flurry mode.
It's always been there. It's never gone away. There's always been speculation over the years that North Korea is closer to China than it is to Russia. But I have consistently heard for decades that, never underestimate the relationship between Russia and North Korea. That's actually the biggest relationship that North Korea has with any country. And with that, the North Koreans recently, recently it was located, I don't know if they formally said it, but they might send around 30,000 troops to fight the war in Ukraine. That is a phenomenal.
Yeah, and she drives.
Troops.
She got the whip.
Obviously, South Korea
Pushing
is
it.
very closely.
Yeah, she got
South Korea
skills.
just closed the deal to send tanks to Poland. And if you look at how that works, in the war they have all
Yeah, let's get it.
it would be
Alright.
well, the Ukraine
Okay,
would
little
want
drip.
something, to backstop that. So they have T-72s. They can be sent over there. They have a bunch of Leopard 2s, different weapons that can be sent over there. But they want to put a first grade.
Oh, she's smart. They're going through the back.
South Korea's kind of countering it is by putting its tanks in, running the border and freeing up.
Goes through the back too.
Armor to support Ukraine. And then Russia kind of threw out something about they were tightening up their nuclear cooperation. That's not entirely clear what that is. Of course, the big fear has always been that Russia would
Yeah.
provide certain
can punt, go to the front,
technology,
go to
if you
the
will,
back.
things that North Korea needs, particularly what it needs for reentry vehicles with ballistic missiles, the warheads, if you will. That's one of the more difficult parts of ICBMs, if you are, is go through the atmosphere, in exactly the right place, not
I got
through
you.
the atmosphere, and hit where it wants to hit. That's everything. We think North Korea has problems with. Big fears that Russia will hold up with the nuclear arsenal, ICBM arsenal, that much more lethal, but also
God. God, me.
United States now has consistently and strongly condemned North
Yo,
Korea's
B, it's crazy.
to the Russians. Way too.
care. They absolutely don't care. I've never heard of the Russians condemning the North Koreans' human rights record. The North Koreans are absolutely horrific. If you want to go back historically, in the 80s, when they had, basically they had self-imposed bans. Yes, there were weather problems, but their collectivist techniques were so inefficient.
Wow.
So they were so invasion.
Wow. They don't come through. They don't come through. Wow. Wow.
It's been a huge problem.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Come in. Go ahead. Alright. Go ahead. Go ahead. Poke that up. Poke that up.
It's just one of the many tools that the machine uses to sustain power. It is
Got him.
primarily storage and population. So,
Got
they just had one of us senior.
I got the back arm.
Disappear.
Over the safe, bro.
And so, well,
Over the safe, you just fine.
they're being sticking through some true big photos to make sure he's just remember. Photos to check them. That's why they. So it's been a treat that the 19. If I could use it as a reference, sort of thinking, and it's really good to use. Speaks out some bread, speaks out.
Come on, get to the front.
But yeah, Russia never got you.
Why do the Russians need the North Koreans, and why do the North Koreans need the Russians?
Well, the North Koreans see the Russians because they want for technology. They have a old, dilapidated military ground force.
Russia and North Korea, man.
Everything they have
America.
is not a nuclear weapon.
Let's make America
It's
great
old,
again.
It's
Oh
maintained.
no, he get to
It's
the
not
car.
operational. They don't
How
really
did it
have
go?
a credible, local force, if you will. They, in fact, I would say they don't have a lot of credible military force, division, military force. At this point, it's still dangerous, and they have submarines and a variety of other things. But it's very old, so they want Russia to kind of replenish their armaments, if you will, and what Russia needs is a growth state that they could use for not just conventional purposes, but also for unconventional purposes, hybrid warfare type of thing, if you will. They have a
My
state
bad, bro.
that will gladly provide them as many troops as they need. I have heard estimates up to 100, potentially even 150,000 North Korean troops could potentially be sent into Russia. And frankly, Kim Jong-un could do that, and there would really be any domestic repercussions for doing so. So it just gives you an idea of what they could provide Russia and what Russia can provide them. The quid pro quo, and it's going to be free. And as long as this war's going there, as long as Russia is desperate for allies, it's going to grow.
What do we need to know about North Korea's military? We're looking at the images on the screen showing some of what they do there.
Got him.
What is
Got
the personality, if you will, of the soldiers that come from North Korea?
Well, they are brainwashed, all right? They are dedicated to Kim Jong-un, that's almost deified in terms of the way they view him and his father and his grandfather. So they're, they just can't imagine anything but Kim Jong-un and the current regime, the current system. So that said, they are not in the best physical shape. Their health care is horrible. They take their troops and use them for long periods of the year as simply an agricultural labor force to help augment farms and farming. They use them for a variety of things which have nothing to do with military readiness, military training, military preparedness. And reports consistently come out that just the average stuff that any military rely on, like trucks to move troops to different guard posts and things like that, that the trucks break down all the time, that they have enormous maintenance issues. And a lot of it is the trucks and everything else that's, that's rolling stock, if you will, to include tracked vehicles. It's old. It's really old. It's falling apart, and they don't even have that, if you will. But of course, one of the sources of parts would be to go to Russia and ask them if they can go in their military war stocks and start cannibalizing some of their older vehicles to send parts to North Korea. The problem is, Russia has gone in and activated some of its old war stocks and sent them off to fight in Ukraine, where they have taken horrendous losses because those are not survivable platforms on the battlefield. And that kind of tells you the conventional situation is in the Korean Peninsula, that they don't have strong conventional force. They have is nuclear weapons. They also have a lot of chemical weapons and other things that fall into the biological things like that, unconventional weapons, if you will. And that's always been the strong point is unconventional weapons. And frankly, if I could say unconventional warfare, I think we call strong.
Get it.
Operations, things like that. That's always been their strong points.
Forgive me, just for the Middle East, how about everything?
One thing on prostate cancer hasn't changed. Just nice. It's a great memory. Hey, we'll help you back up.
WSI. TWS cleared.
Those unwrong. But my PSA was rising. So my doctor recommended you back up.
The study measured 2 times longer without the prostate cancer spreading, added Rebecca to ADT. Rebecca may also extend survival. Rebecca may cause serious side effects, including heart disease and surgery. But your doctor will regulate if you have chest pain or discomfort or shortness of breath, loss of consciousness or surgery. Rebecca can harm unborn babies and cause loss of pregnancy. So effective birth control during treatment for one week after the last nursing event. Common side effects of Rebecca working, some liver function tests, increased white blood cells, and feeling more tired than usual. Rebecca helps you learn for what you love. Ask your doctor about
Let's go. Get it.
Grow. Seems like honeysuckle. Patterns blossom with lemon yellow. So you take the garden back less traffic. This year to plant the seeds.
See the driving skills. I do this in real life. Nah, fuck what y'all do. I'm done. Ain't got it. When I hop in the car, I hop in the back seat. When I get in the car, I get in the back seat. If you know, you know.
spider. It's always saying, saying the most.
Niggas clap me.
Members
Alright.
hostage as well.
Niggas not playing with my life.
Warships were around to help them kind of calibrate intelligence officer and host the podcast. I'm sure still here with us. This one is gone away. Guns extensively, but now the rest of the seats have been there at West East. Let's return to the point with the Houthis. Fighting has begun again. They're aiming at ships again.
Bro.
Again, that's just one. I'll pull up this near post piece again. That shows what's sadly sinking. The Europe says an officer on one of the vessels now said desperately trying to get assistance from the British Navy and European naval task force sent by Poland. He said he was told there were no ships in the area. Isn't there help out there now?
So one of the things, well, I should say first, the ceasefire was a thing that was negotiated between the U.S. and the Houthis. And what makes it interesting is that it was always cabinet meetings, would they just stop firing on U.S. ships? Or would they stop firing on all ships altogether? As a matter of practice, they kind of just stopped firing on ships, and the anti-ship threat started to dissipate. Of course, now we see this one with the end of the 12-day war and everything that's happened with Iran and Israel and the U.S. going in and bombing some sites in Iran, that they have started again. And if they didn't fire on the U.S. flying carriers, but they managed to sink two. And there's just not enough European Union, NATO, British, which is part of NATO. Obviously, the U.S. is part of NATO as well, but there's just not enough international task force ships that have been down there. A lot more kind of relocated that were in the area, relocated to deal with a potential threat on the Strait of Hormuz that Iran had posed at one time. But yeah.
Yo, that's quick to kill the chat.
Naval combatant
They're so good, I end up getting clapped. It's crazy, yo. It's crazy. Who the devil, I believe,
ships will respond with, in many cases, anti-air defense missiles that are far more expensive and right now in very short supply to take those really low-cost drones out. And so others, you know, as a matter of fact, just they've been kind of staying far offshore, out of sight. And of course, in some ways, dealing with the fact that the Houthis don't have a whole lot of maritime domain awareness. So by side, some limitations on what they did have as far as sensor systems, things like that, that have been basically debilitated through airstrikes over the many months.
Let's pull up a statement from the UN Secretary. He says, I strongly condemn the recent resumption of Houthi attacks on civilian vessels in the Red Sea. The UN remains committed to broader de-escalation efforts in the region and a sustainable and peaceful resolution. Why is it so hard to come to a peaceful resolution with the Houthis? They certainly aren't the strongest military out there. Explain why the geography of the region complicates things.
Well, you and I constantly talk about the 8th century AD or the Far Era. But they've been around for a while. Right? This is a kind of a, certainly with the Houthis themselves, extremist Shia sect. They are in the Saudi Peninsula in the Middle East, surrounded by Sunni Islamic countries. So that's one reason they've always had a very strong warrior culture. And I'm not saying the Houthis themselves, yes,
He's a shows are
the
the
Nights, but
What
this,
is he doing,
that
though?
they come from has always had a strong independent streak, a very strong warrior culture, and they've had
to get
for
the
the many centuries, they've had constantly on the offensive or defensive, if you will, dealing with all their neighbors. It's also the terrain.
Around drinking is weird, man. That's why I feel like looked at my relationship with alcohol. Not me. You can't drink and drive. Why? I get it. It's dangerous. You can't drink and drive. What the fuck you have to come home before? Saying? That's entrapment. I mean, other dangerous things you can do before you're 21.
Whether that's satellites or
It's dangerous things before you're 21. You can drive a car. You can have a good book. You can be in a war. You can do porn. Same to y'all. You can do porn before you're 21. You can suck dick legally. Pay taxes on it. Before you're 21. You know, 18, 19, 20. That's 3 years. You a dad. You be 3 years in the game, dog. You go to work. You know you ready to have an hard day at work. You get off work. You just pull a double. Just one dick right away. You tired. You sticky. You crunchy. Your pussy's on fire. You don't work and got a free son. That's not fair. Give her some tequila.
Shit crazy. I can't believe that. I can't believe I'm tired, yo.
anything coming from our system, because what happened with Iran. And the other thing too, Iran's axis of resistance is really in desperate straits right now. They, you know, the upwards portion of the revolutionary parties of the Iranian regime has been extremely, so they're logistically support all the axis members, but to include the Houthis. It's a different environment than it was, say, a year ago.
The ceasefire is a thing that's real and real, as you mentioned. All day long, that ceasefire is all day. But while the ceasefire's been implemented, the Iran batch of these still been firing straight at Israel. They able to do that.
You know, it's interesting, when the ceasefire was declared between Iran and Israel, the big question we all had was, will that include the Houthis? Will they actually go along with what being said? Would they, Hezbollah didn't formally make a policy aware of that they wouldn't do any attacks, but they kind of really stood back. They just watched that whole thing and said, we're not going to get involved. The Shiite militias in And Iran also kind of stood back and were having a dialogue with the government about, hey, we need to kind of quit making ourselves a big target for the Israelis and the Americans. And so they're in a dialogue right now to try and stand back. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but there is some sort of dialogue going on there. Hamas, well, Hamas is what Hamas is. I don't need to say anything more. But the Houthis was kind of the wild card, which is which way will they go? They're still a relatively intact force. They're in a place where nobody's going to, there's no Israeli tanks that are going to go rolling into Houthi territory. And certainly its neighbor, Saudi Arabia, is not inclined to do so.
He passed it? All right, good.
To do so.
Chat.
The Egyptians,
Yeah, they got me.
military force, are reticent to ever get involved in the ground action or any other action in the Houthi territories down in Yemen. So they are there, and they have been firing on Israel, and now they're back firing, basically closing up one of the largest, choke points, if you will, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, but also the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, this vital waterway for international commerce, trade, and passenger stuff as well. Not now, but at times in the past. So they're back doing it again. And obviously Iran, if they had influence on them, they didn't exert it. But there's a bit of thought that Iran can only tell the Houthis so much what to do, and they kind of have their own agenda.
So, is it fair to say that the Houthis at this point are the strongest Iranian proxy?
I think that's actually, that's, at one time I would say, no, the Hezbollah is much bigger, much stronger, and I'm not sure that that's true anymore. I really do think the Houthis are probably the strongest element. Now, in raw numbers, it depends on how if you talk about dedicated fighters, I would say yes. In raw numbers, if you look at the Iraqi Shia militias, they've got a lot of numbers, but I wouldn't call their militia members necessarily, good soldiers or well-trained or capable soldiers or anything like that. Hezbollah still has a lot theoretically in numbers, but Hezbollah has just been decimated by the Israeli attacks, and they have been politically decimated in other ways. And the Lebanese regime is in discussions with Hezbollah, disarming Hezbollah. So basically get rid of the entire movement, but they might transition into becoming a political movement versus a military movement or a terrorist movement. That would be a huge change. And while big in numbers,
Let's get it.
Force per se that they are necessarily bigger than the Houthis. One might start counting ballistic missiles and things like that and say, well, Hezbollah is still bigger. Yeah, but there's other things that constrain Hezbollah right now.
Hal is the host of the Strap podcast. You discussed this a bit on Strap. Correct? Put it up on Strap.
Enough, Charlie.
This weekend.
Strat, I kind of deep dive on the Houthis. I was looking at this. We have this resurgent threat. We have the most deadly attack that they've done in many years in this last week. They're clogging their waterway. They're threatening a variety of countries around the world. And so I just kind of did a deep dive on who they are, what they've been about, what they've been doing, but also kind of finished talking about where are they going and what can other countries do, what are other countries willing to do to deal with them. It is truly a strategic conundrum, but it is a conundrum that we're going to have to tackle because we just can't sit back and let them be this constant, ongoing threat to maritime commerce and international trade.
You can listen to the Strap podcast, any podcasts.
Terrible problem.
He's a true innocent.
Charlie, shut up.
That's it. How can we get off?
Your jokes are not fair. See you soon. So, let's take a question. Let's break. We'll look at the White House. Yeah, it was 2.5. We'll be right soon. Days.
Shall I see?
Faces
for light and fresh air. So you can better connect with nature, your home, and what's around you. Because home isn't just how a space works. It's how it feels. VLX Skylines, transforming spaces into favorite places.
There's manifestation plans. You gotta flap up on mansion. She's in bed. Perfect pictures. The food just bad. Good bad, but like it's all the thing you're on. You can do it on this. Your body. What you gonna do? What's the bad? Just stand like a man. So it's all just the thing you want. It's what I want.
Huh.
Diplomats of attempts to impersonate Secretary of State Marco Rubio and possibly other officials using technology driven by artificial intelligence. That morning, coming after the nation discovered that an imposter posing as Secretary Rubio had attempted to reach out to at least 3 foreign ministers, a U.S. senator, and a governor. Joining us now to speak more on this is Martin Neal, the President of Government Affairs at the AI Policy Network. Mark, good to see you.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
Of course. Mark, I gotta start with this because I hear this and I gotta be honest with you, I'm scared. All right. When you hear that we are seeing these types of capabilities with artificial intelligence, I mean, it's the Secretary of State. What goes through your mind?
The first thing that goes through my mind is scams here, but my systems that they don't print. Yeah, today is the worst it will ever be. Also, it's going to happen better. This was a big way to help the system. Country's not prepared yet.
Okay, see, I'm glad that you mentioned that because it.
Come on, bro. Keep clapping me, bro.
What have we seen when it comes to the development of artificial intelligence throughout the last several decades, even the last several years?
Yeah, the story of AI has a long, it's long and distinguished. It goes back to the 1950s, and some people even say before that. But really, it wasn't until the 2010s, with the advent of what the technical people call deep learning, that we started to see true collateral value. And then from there, it's just been on that. It's the first new these capabilities today that so different. Mostly like when human beings are grappling with and thinking about problems.
What makes this technology so successful? What's into it? What's so hard for people to be able to detect that it's not a real person there on the other end?
The three primary ingredients that every AI system needs are computational power, our data, and math. And the real interesting thing that's unlocked all this very powerful capability has really been a function of scale. So it's more compute, more data, better math.
Charlie, enough.
These systems get smarter and smarter and smarter. And so as you think about the voice cloning example, well, if an AI system only has 5 or 10 samples to train from, then it might not be so good. But all of a sudden, if we have the computational resources and data to train off 10 million, well now you have some serious scale and you have some serious capability to hold on to that.
Over the last several weeks, we've seen some hearings being held down there on Capitol Hill. Some lawmakers are kind of questioning the capabilities of being on that court's going to tell them about it. Also, the plays to make sure that there is a handle on this sort of attack.
It's a great question, and unfortunately, the Congress just took a little bit navel-gaze for a while. But the states, however, have kind of stepped up. Whether in Tennessee or Utah or Texas, just trying to grapple with how it is that these systems should be governed from a child safety perspective, from a consumer protection perspective. And the Congress seems, the establishment Republicans, seems very focused today on not enacting any meaningful guardrails on this technology, but instead trying to force states not to do anything, and not to do anything for a long period of time. I think this is a very misguided position to take, and it's one that, as we're seeing with examples like what's going on with Secretary of State Rubio, this technology is getting more value, and think about what the right guardrails would be.
I want to go back to something that you said at the top of this discussion, which is what will it? And then start with it's about this kind of attack here. It's right now, it's impersonating the Secretary of State. I was reaching out to foreign ministers, the governors, looking to think of being really sad. We need to stop this. So what can people do to make sure that they're what is sort of size pulling out of filter? What's something I can give it a name that's not really person on the internet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sadly, because as we talked about, this technology will get better. There's examples that might suggest this is an AI, it can always be changing. I think the most important thing that you can do right now, your family, especially you can guard against these scamming calls, is really to develop like a safe word. So if you get a call from a child who's in prison, and they ask me to send you money, get from that thank you. And you need to sort of families know that this threat exists. Start to have contingency plans, because as I mentioned before, the team plans is going to do much here, and it's going to be kind of, and they have to step up there and do.
They really do focus a lot on.
It's hot, gang. It's hot right now in GT, gang.
Because this tech is only going to get more advanced in the future. And, a lot of people say that, folks like you who really study this and focused on this, you are aware of just how dangerous this is in the future. What do you know behind the scenes?
One thing that my group thinks a lot about is human rights. On human rights and a capability called official intelligence. And this is sort of been the body of computer scientists for decades. For many decades, this is science fiction and not true. And then years with working with computing power, applying these capabilities at the scale that we talked about earlier. And it evolves to damn these scientists and companies think this level of capabilities that we make. And then what's been really interesting to see is that what you have in AI that's better and all of the tasks, for example, including AI research itself. You could have this intelligence explosion getting to artificial
just chill.
sort of like bias.
Should try to look like obviously else.
And that is where you see some of these very dystopian things like extinction risk. It's far-fetched and severe that sounds. And it's something that we all take really seriously. Just look, people building systems along following the belts here. Buying bunkers and planting them further down after they release these capabilities. This is something that we need the public to be aware of. We need to start calling your Congress people because it's moving so fast that if we wait until it's already upon us, it might unfortunately be too late. Now, I also want to have a tremendous amount of uncertainty, but is that there's enough critical evidence that
let me get out the whip. Oh, bro.
Stick note, because, this sci-fi movie, it seems that we're living in. It could be kind of a downer. for some people, and for the most part, this conversation is like just a thing. But if you can just reiterate to our viewers here some of the positives that should years because of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely, and we have to kind of unfortunately address the dangers head on, and so we get to these amazing benefits that are also going to be coming out about education. I assume that one of the big AI companies would be announced a new partnership with educators to give these capabilities and ways that are going to give our students specialize in highly capable AI tutors to help accelerate our education outcomes. I think healthcare is another one that I'm very excited about in terms of the ability of solving diseases and creating new cures and then extending human life and increasing human function. This future could be expressly laid out on millions of staff, a true golden age of innovation for the American people, and a usher in a level of prosperity that we've never seen. And then for us to make sure that we can take full advantage of those capabilities, we just have to do what we do with any other big profit technology. It's acknowledge the risk to take reactions to that future can be very bright.
Future indeed. Lots to look forward to, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. And Mark Field, here, President of Government Affairs at AI Policy Journal. Appreciate your time on the audio. Box, we're going to keep on with this.
Get them niggas on my ain't catching me, bro.
Some guys
He's not catching me.
because of romantic hotel works for some with no others. Find exactly what you're looking for. Booking.com will be done here.
Get about it, man.
Some of the latest news regarding immigration and all of those headlines that have been coming out the past several days. Taking a live look here over at California, because that's where I want to start. In fact, we just learned that yesterday on Friday, a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to halt indiscriminate immigration stops and arrests in 7 California counties, including Los Angeles. Immigrant advocacy groups filed a lawsuit last week accusing the president's administration of systematically targeting migrants in Southern California during its ongoing immigration crackdown. The plaintiffs include 3 detained immigrants and citizens, one who was held despite showing agents his identification. For the latest on all of these ICE raids that we have seen in California and across the country, let's get to this report from Fox News correspondent William Roshbess.
Hundreds of protesters clashed with federal immigration agents in Southern California on Thursday as ICE and Border Patrol agents conduct raids at 2 licensed marijuana farms in Ventura County, where officials found agents accompanying minors all here illegally. Agents deployed balls, tear gas, and flashbangs, where they were met by demonstrators for throwing rocks.
They certainly can't put hands on nature.
The scene became increasingly dangerous when one protester appeared to fire a gun at agents. The FBI now offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. California Governor Gavin Newsom responding to the incident, saying that the administration's actions both chaos, fear, and terror in communities. Some federal
What's up, Zach?
Nothing about you.
What happened?
I'm actually use your account so we can play Minecraft because
What account?
on your account because David said we're not going to use account.
What account?
Caden's account because he said yes, but he said when David said you're not going to use Caden's account.
Go in the account. If Kid didn't say yes, you could go in his account, then go. So Deja Kid didn't say yes.
I thought, yeah, but he's, yeah. I thought I just can make a guest account, but you would say no.
Oh,
You.
on the PlayStation?
Yeah, because I can just delete it.
No.
Thanks for having me.
Alright, you can use Minecraft on your phone or your iPad, right? So play it there.
Let's start with
Go.
that order from that federal judge to halt
So I can't make the guest
operations in
account?
California.
Because I could just
Now,
delete it.
what
Okay.
does the court have
Go
to
ahead.
prove in order for that halt and that pause to stay in effect? And as we heard during that report, the borders are autonomous, that everything
Fucking
is being
kids,
done
right?
according to the law.
Oh,
So what do you
shit.
make about both sides of
Oh,
this issue?
shit. Wait.
I think like both those comments just
I
now.
feel like kill everyone.
One of the comments was about indiscriminate searches, and the other was First Amendment rights. So it's a delicate balance because since President Trump returned to office, we've seen an incredible prioritization of immigration and enforcement, but then the enforcement has to be balanced with all. So we need to make sure that searches and seizures are less, deportations are in compliance with the law, and that they are not indiscriminate. We also need to make sure that people's First Amendment rights are honored. People have the right to protest peacefully, whether they're good citizens or not in this country, so it's relevant balance.
It's just to get down to the point of making sure that there was a great on that they with the law. What needs to be established for that to happen? Given the fact that these agents, they do have power to be here tracking some of the illegal immigrants that they are seeing across the country.
Sure, they have wide power, especially in places of business. A ICE agent does not need a warrant to go into a place of business. It's public. They can went to go behind and into the some that you want to show was an open field. That is much more difficult to require a warrant and a higher standard than going behind a closed door in a private business. So if they have it, then it's much easier. But if they don't have a warrant, if the area is wide open, like what you're showing on your screen right now, different, and it's much easier for ICE to go in and search, make arrests, and put people in deportation, regardless of whether they have it.
So there are a lot of headlines that I'm going to get to with you here, Elizabeth, and not just those words that happened in California, but I want to put up on this photo here.
Everybody died, now this nigga don't read.
Another judge, a federal judge, actually accusing the Trump administration of refusing to provide details for the deportation plans of PMR for Brando here. And now, what is the government required to disclose under these circumstances? Now, just randomly watching here, Kilmer Garcia, a Maryland man who is reported to El Salvador, he is back here in the U.S. and do believe he is being held in Tennessee based on other charges. But kind of the mess here, no matter what, as to what's going to happen with his future.
Well, I think like what we just saw recently with Khalil, we're going to see a loss. Mr. Abrego is back in Tennessee over correct, and this is of course an opportunity to support it without a warrant. and had already been given protections to not be deported. He was given what's called parole and removal, because this year was that he would suffer and be persecuted by gangs in El Salvador. So he is back, and he is detained partly due to the request by his attorneys for his safety, because the concern would be that if he were released again, he would just be re-deported. But getting to the question, the Department of Justice was told that they needed to facilitate this return from El Salvador to the United States. And the response was that he would be returned, or he would leave El Salvador, but not necessarily go to the United States to go to third country. He is now back in the United States in Tennessee, and he is facing charges of conspiracy to smuggle or transport undocumented immigrants and actually how to transport them. But as you mentioned, the judge had some problems with that. There was double hearsay. It was completely illogical to claim that he was a gang member for many years when he had been it was illogical to claim that he had in Texas 2 to 4 times a week. So they was going to need to prove the case with this conspiracy charge and the charge of transporting immigrants otherwise. We're going to see him be released and possibly re-deported. This is going to be a long haul for him and his family, and I think it will result in a lawsuit.
We'll move on to the next topic I'd like to discuss, Elizabeth. Given these two situations that I just presented here during this discussion, the raids in California, this issue with Killmonger and Garcia, and this divide that we're seeing between the federal government and many of these state and local lawmakers, you've seen cases like this in the past where there is just two completely different ways that both of these agencies are trying to approach the situation. Is there anything that this can be comparable to?
This is a completely unprecedented time. I have not seen anything like this before. And the condition here is that immigration is a federal issue to be the federal government, but
About to end the live soon, Jack. Real soon.
For example, and Florida just lost a lawsuit. They tried to enforce SB 4C, which makes it illegal to enter Florida after having entered the United States without permission, or be in Florida without having entered legally. The Supreme Court did not give a detailed opinion. They just basically upheld the previous court's ruling that that is not permissible, that it violates the federal principles of federalism. So that's the struggle, right? States' rights versus what the feds are entitled to. And because immigration is federal,
Dumbass, they can be trying to get me, man.
trying to make their own immigration laws. I give you the example of stamps for patents, for example. States cannot issue their own stamps. States cannot issue their own patents. And if a state were to try and do that, regardless of how you feel about immigration, the reasonable person would probably say the state doesn't have the authority to do that. The state doesn't have the authority to enforce immigration law, but they can work in conjunction with the federal government. And that's what's going to have to happen to make this smoother, so we see less civil unrest like you're seeing, for example, in California.
All right, this next topic that I'd like to get to here, you mentioned it a little bit briefly within the answer previous to the one that you just gave us, but Mahmoud Khalil, we just heard this week that he is suing the Trump administration for $20 million. Elizabeth, can you break down this lawsuit for us here? Mahmoud Khalil, a reminder for our audience here, he is the Colombia activist who was detained by immigration enforcement there for his participation in Trump happening at the campus case. But again, he is suing the Trump administration for $1 million. Elizabeth, if you could break down this lawsuit for us, and what is the likelihood that he would win this case?
Well, the lawsuit stems around the fact that he was put into deportation for exercising his First Amendment rights. He was charged basically with being un-American and an anti-Semite, and that causes that presents a problem for foreign policy. And there is a provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act. If you are acting adversely to foreign policy, you can be put in deportation. You can't be deported without the traditional protections. There's an exception to that. If the Secretary of State deems that you basically have the danger to foreign policy. But the problem there is that a judge has already said that that is void for vagueness. The traditional average person doesn't know what our foreign policy efforts are because foreign policy is usually covert. So he was detained for several months. He lost 15 pounds and what he claims were poor conditions. He missed the birth of his child, and he's suing for $20 million. The was imprisonment for being steered as an anti-Semite and for a malicious prosecution. And I think he benefits there. The question is whether his activities rose to the level of being supportive of terror, and whether he knew that they were. So those are the questions that will dictate whether he's going to be successful with that.
Well, we'll be watching out to see what happens in that lawsuit. Just one more point I'd like to get into, Elizabeth. Alligator Alcatraz, I'm sure you've also been following this up very closely. It's that new immigrant detention facility established in the Florida Everglades. I'll bring up some of this footage that we have here. Alligator Alcatraz, of course, that's what it's being dubbed. This week, several Florida lawmakers, Governor Ron DeSantis, because he has denied access to this facility. Elizabeth, what kind of access and how much access are lawmakers required to have with facilities like this?
Well, I think that's the question, right? How much is allowed? And I think you can see at the federal level, the president has wide discretion, the state has wide discretion. But traditionally, lawmakers have been allowed to visit places within their constituency. They have been allowed access. It is politically, traditionally allowed. Now, I know no law that prohibits it, but there certainly can be a policy against allowing people in, whether they're politicians in the legislature or so I think that it's probably legal. It's just consistent with what we have done in the past, allowing members of our legislature to facility, in this case a very controversial one, that traditionally it would have been allowed. The government would certainly deny access. But it is just not consistent with precedent, and I think it's appropriate to allow both of our people to have a facility in their own constituency to inspect it and see for themselves what's happening. Lawmakers are part, obviously, of the process.
Well, Elizabeth, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, so there was a lot to get to during this segment. I appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything you would like to add before I let you go? I think that we also need to talk about that we haven't discussed during this particular interview.
I imagine that it's probably some average is 50,000 people, and that is coming from a effort to take citizenship away from people based on how they answered a question on their naturalization application. That question is whether you have ever committed a crime or ever not. So depending on how you answer that question, if you naturalize, now the government is going back and looking at what you have done and said you wrote that application. And if they feel there were no misrepresentation, they're making efforts to get and plus 50,000 people. We're seeing that right now in the case of the mayoral candidate in the city who's a naturalized U.S. citizen, and there's talk about denaturalizing him based on some comments that he had made regarding what is perceived as terrorism, basically his position on Israel. And so if that is considered support of terrorism, then they have to proceed with denaturalization efforts. That is very unusual, and it has to go through federal court, but we are seeing efforts to do that. So I do have a feeling that's what we'll be talking about next.
And we'll be having a conversation very soon, Elizabeth. Very unusual times and unprecedented times, especially when it comes to immigration and some of this enforcement across the country. But Elizabeth Ricci, immigration attorney, always a pleasure to have you here at Live Now from Fox. Take care. We're going to check in soon.
Thank you.
We're going to step away for a brief commercial break. Before I do so, though, I want to put up this, a post from Homeland Security here. Take a look at your screen. It says, quote, a district judge is defining the will of the American people. America's brave men and women are removing burglars, MS-13 gang members, pedophiles, rapists, turning the worst of the worst from Golden State communities. Law and order will prevail. And this is in reference to some of those raids that we've seen happening in California over the last several weeks. We'll be right back.
And you know, there are so many jackpots that you never know. So many jackpots. So many jackpots. BetMGM Casino. A jackpot.
Download to get 100% deposit match.
Get it out of here. So I can kill the horse and go back. Get it out of here.
Design your feel in every detail. Technology as innovative as it is effortless. These are luxuries you don't have to wait for. This is Buick. Now, Buick, exceptional by design.
Celebrate Independence Day. Get 0.9% APR on these 2025 Buick bonds. Plus, current eligible non-GM owners get up to $3,000 allowance on Encore GX.
Out of here. Dumbass little woman. I'm about to end the live streaming soon, y'all. In one more minute. 1 minute. Once I finish this mission right here, I'm out of here, y'all.
Stand up stories. Discuss it from. Thank you so much for being here with us.